Hi everyone, Mr. Ong here. In today's lesson, we'll be learning about the 1950 Hertogh Riots. This follows up from the previous lessons that we've been studying on how the British have been attempting to win local support in Singapore. And as you have seen through the lessons, they have had mixed results. Certain things that they've done succeeded, while certain things they've done kind of failed. Okay, so the 1950s ushers in a period of a lot of political instability where many Singaporeans will be rioting against the British. And the first big riot that took place in Singapore was that of the 1950s Hertogh riots. Here you can see the picture. These are a group of Malay Muslims gathering around in Singapore, preparing for the riot. In the middle picture, you have Hertogh herself, this little girl, and her adopted mother, Che Amina. And on the right, you see cars that have been set on fire. Okay, so that's just a prelude to what you can expect in today's lesson. So for today's lesson, there are going to be three main parts. The first part is that you guys are going to be watching a video documentary on the Hertogh riots. As you watch the video, there will be a worksheet that you have to fill in the main events that took place in the riot. Thereafter, the second part of the lesson is that you guys will be taking on the points of views of different groups involved in the riots. Okay, so some groups will be taking on the view of Hertogh, some groups will be thinking from the perspective of the British authorities, so on and so forth. You guys are going to be discussing this issue on whether the decision to return Hertogh to her natural parents was right or wrong. Okay, don't worry, you'll see more of this in the video lesson later. In the last part, we'll have some consolidation about what this Hertogh riot revealed about the views of the Singaporeans toward the British. Okay, so at this point, the teacher would be pausing my video and playing this YouTube video. You can find this on YouTube. It's titled Diary of a Nation, 11 December Hertogh Riots. Okay, the teacher will be playing the full length of the video, and as you watch the video, please fill in your handout. I assume that you guys have already watched the video and have attempted to fill in the handout as best as you can. It is important whenever we study history to have a good sense of the timeline. Okay, we need to know exactly which events happen at which point, because in history everything flows according to a cause and effect. There's a reason. Okay, so if you have missed out on certain blanks, we will be going through some of the blanks in the succeeding slides. Okay, so we start off with the chronology, the flow of events. So we saw that in 1942, Hertogh's father, he was a prisoner of war in World War II, and him and his parents were captured by the Japanese. And so during the interim, they had to leave Maria in the care of Che Amina. There was this little discussion, was it given up for adoption or was it a temporary thing? Okay. We would note that Maria, as a young child, stayed with Che Amina for about 5 years, and she was raised a Muslim and given the name Nadra. She only spoke in the Malay language. You can start to think from the perspective of Maria Hertogh, or in this case Nadra, if she had been raised from young as a Malay and a Malay Muslim, how would she identify herself? Okay, so ethnically, if you look at her skin color, she looks like a Dutch person, but in terms of her culture, would she say she's a Dutch person or would she say she's a Muslim person? But after the war, Maria's parents were reunited and realized that their birth daughter was in Malaya, and they would start to make efforts to come and recover her daughter. So this led to the custody battle with the Singapore High Court on whether Maria should remain with Che Amina or be returned to her Dutch parents. Now, here is where things get dicey. The court ruled after a 15-minute hearing that Maria was to be returned to her natural parents. You can start to think in your mind, would 15 minutes be enough for the court to make a good and proper decision on the life of a young woman, and with respect to her parents? Okay, what does this 15 minutes, this short length of time, reveal about how important the court felt about this issue? Okay, and later on there will be an appeal. An appeal meant that one of the parties involved didn't like the decision and wanted the court to reconsider. So after reconsidering, they returned Maria to Che Amina. And on the 1st of August 1950, what happened was this 13-year-old girl, Maria, she'll get married to a 22-year-old man. And as this is going on, the Hertoghs will continue to appeal. Okay. But on December the 2nd, the court finally ruled that Maria should go back to her own biological father, her Dutch father, and they also cancelled her marriage because according to the Dutch law, they didn't allow marriage for those who were under 16 years old. And at that point of time, Maria was a 13-year-old. They felt that she was still considered a girl by Dutch law. Okay? The question here, of course, is yes, the Dutch are correct in using their law, but from the perspective of Che Amina, from the perspective of Maria Hertogh, would she have wanted to follow Dutch law or Muslim law? Okay. Finally, Maria was placed in a convent, which was a Christian, like a Catholic holding house, where she was only allowed to meet her birth mother. Okay. And this started to escalate because on the 9th of December, the Muslims started to use their newspaper to whip up religious feelings among the Muslims. They started to say that, see, this is yet another case of these colonial powers, these Christian colonial powers who do not understand our religion, who are trying to oppress or trying to bully the locals in Singapore. And on the 11th of December, her Che Amina's appeal was rejected after 5 minutes. Once again, you should be thinking to yourself, is 5 minutes enough? If I can see that the rest of Singapore is already starting to get very angry and agitated over this issue, can I really decide on this matter in mere 5 minutes? Okay, so that concludes the chronology. Hopefully that clarifies certain things. Now, what you guys will be doing is to investigate this inquiry question. Was returning Maria Hertogh or Nadja to her Dutch parents the right decision? Okay, so here are the instructions. Firstly, I would like you to gather into groups of 4. Each of your groups will be assigned a different people or group who was involved in this conflict or the riot. Okay, so there are 5 main groups that you're looking at. First one is Maria Hertogh. Second one, Che Amina. Third one, her biological parents. Fourth, the Malay, the Muslim community. And the fifth is the British colonial authorities. Okay, so at this point, the teacher can pause the video, let the class gather into groups of 4, and the teacher can start to assign each group to one of these other perspectives and groups. Okay, it's okay if there's more than one group assigned to one of these actors. Okay, now that you've gathered into your groups, what I would like you to do is to take on the point of view of that person or group and think to yourself how he or she would have answered the inquiry question. So, for example, take on the view of the biological parents. Would he or she think that returning Maria Hertogh to the Dutch parents was the right decision or wrong decision, and explain from the perspective of yourself, of your assigned group, whether, like, why you think so. Okay, so take on the perspective of this group and answer the inquiry question. You guys will have 15 minutes to discuss your group mates and then to respond on the Padlet post. Okay, so how do I want you to respond on the Padlet post? You can say returning Maria Hertogh or Nadja to her Dutch parents was the right or wrong decision. You cancel accordingly because then you explain why your group thinks a certain sort of way. Okay, the link to the Padlet can be found on Google Classroom. Okay. Finally, after all of the groups have completed their posts, what I would like you to do as individuals, read through all of the other different groups. I want you to see from the perspective of multiple sets of people. Okay, and then reflect in the final column of Padlet. What is your own view on the inquiry question? Do you think that returning Maria Hertogh or Nadja to her parents was the right or wrong decision, and explain why? Okay, so just to recap, what you need to do is, hop over to Padlet. Okay, so here are all the different columns. And then finally, after you read all of the different posts by your friends, explain what your own personal point of view is. Okay, the teacher can pause the video to let the students do this part of the activity. Okay, finally, I hope that you guys had a good time doing the discussion and had a chance to reflect on your own personal thoughts on the matter. I hope that you realize the point of history is not to give you any easy answers, because none exist. There are no right or wrong decisions, so to speak, in history. But more than that, it's about coming to your own personal opinion. And when you come to your own personal opinion, what makes a strong opinion is that you have considered the point of views of multiple people. The more views you consider, the better or more well-rounded your perspective is. So that is the point of history. You may not necessarily agree with the different parties involved. For example, Mr. Ong personally doesn't agree with the British court or the British colonial authorities, but at least I understand where they are coming from. Okay, you may not have to agree, but at least you understand. Now, let us draw to a close. Let's consider why the Maria Hertogh riots occurred And more importantly, what does this reveal about the locals' sentiments or feelings toward the British? Okay. So, at the very basic level, the locals felt betrayed because they thought that the British were taking sides with the Dutch colonial authorities. They saw this as a case of the Europeans teaming up against the local people in Singapore. And they felt that the British were insensitive to the feelings of the Malay community. As you saw, there were multiple cases where significant court decisions were being made within 15 minutes, within 5 minutes. This showed the Malay community or the locals in Singapore that, hey, maybe the British aren't that interested in hearing our own thoughts and opinions. And accordingly, they would rightfully feel discriminated against and frustrated. And as such, the riots began not merely as a religious conflict, but largely it was a protest against the British. Okay. And therefore, this is the first riot that we'll be studying. This laid the foundations for the locals to begin aspiring or begin looking forward to political independence from the British. Okay, so this is the first riot of many. In the subsequent weeks, you'll be studying many other riots, and in each of these riots, there's a different element that comes out that shows frustrations towards the British. Okay, hope you guys had a good class. Okay, thank you.